Imagine you're sitting on your couch, your phone is buzzing on the coffee table, and for some reason that little vibration feels like a physical blow to the chest. It's a text from a friend asking to grab coffee, or maybe it's a family member checking in, or a partner wondering why you've been so quiet lately. In that moment, you don't feel loved or sought after, you feel hunted. You feel this overwhelming, suffocating urge to just pull the plug on everything. You want to delete your accounts, change your number, move to a town where nobody knows your name, and just disappear. Most people look at the act of cutting everyone off, the ghosting, the door slamming, the sudden withdrawal, and they label it as cold or flaky or even cruel. They think it's about a lack of care. But if you're the one holding the scissors, you know it's actually the opposite. It's not that you don't care, it's that you care so much, and the world has become so loud that your brain has decided the only way to survive is to turn the volume down to zero.
We tend to live in a culture that prizes staying connected above almost all else. So when someone goes dark, we treat it like a moral failing. We call them avoidant, as if it's a dirty word, or we assume they're just over it. But let's peel back the layers of that onion for a second. Think of your emotional capacity like a circuit breaker in an old house. Most of the time, the lights are on, the fridge is running, and everything is fine. But then you plug in a space heater and a toaster and a hair dryer all at once. The wires get hot. The system can't handle the load. To keep the whole house from burning down, the circuit breaker flips. Everything goes black. The cutting off of people isn't an act of aggression. It's a psychological circuit breaker. It is your nervous system's way of saying, if I take on one more emotional demand, I am going to shatter.
This often starts long before that phone started buzzing on the coffee table. It usually begins with a concept we call hyper-independence. Now, in our society, being independent is usually seen as a badge of honor. We love the self-made person, the one who doesn't need anyone. But in the world of psychology, hyper-independence is often just a fancy term for a trauma response. If you grew up in an environment where the people who were supposed to take care of you were inconsistent or overwhelming or perhaps even dangerous, your brain learned a very specific, very lonely lesson. People are unpredictable, and relying on them is a liability. You learned that the only person who can truly keep you safe is you. So you built a fortress. And the thing about fortresses is that they're great for keeping enemies out, but they're also really effective at making you feel trapped inside. When you feel the urge to cut everyone off, it's often because your fortress feels like it's being breached. Every "how are you" feels like a demand for energy you don't have. Every "we should hang out" feels like an obligation you can't fulfill.
Let's talk about the science of this for a moment, because your brain is doing some pretty heavy lifting behind the scenes. When you're in this state of overwhelm, your amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for the fight or flight response, is basically screaming. It's stuck in flight mode. But since you can't literally run away from your life most of the time, you run away socially. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking part of your brain, gets sidelined. You aren't thinking, I should probably explain to my friends that I'm burnt out and need a week of space. Instead, your lizard brain is just shouting, "Get out! Escape! Shut it down!" This is why, in the moment of cutting someone off, there is often a strange, intoxicating sense of relief. It feels like taking off a pair of shoes that are 3 sizes too small. For a few hours, or even a few days, the silence feels like heaven. You finally feel like you can breathe again, because you're no longer responsible for anyone else's emotions but your own. But there's a bittersweet irony here, isn't there? We cut people off to find peace, but we often end up in a vacuum. I like to think of this as the Astronaut Paradox. You've successfully pushed yourself away from the space station because the noise and the clanging of the machinery were too much to bear. Now, you're floating in the vast, silent beauty of deep space. It's quiet, it's peaceful, but you're also running out of oxygen, and you're realizing that the very thing you tethered yourself away from was your only source of life. This is why the cutoff is rarely a permanent solution. It's a temporary escape that eventually leaves us feeling
feeling more alienated and othered than we were before. We start to wonder if there's something fundamentally broken in us because we can't seem to handle what everyone else seems to manage so easily, the simple act of existing alongside other humans. We should also talk about the preemptive strike. This is a psychological maneuver where you cut someone off not because they did something wrong, but because you're terrified that eventually they will. It's the logic of, I'm going to leave you before you can leave me. If you've experienced abandonment in the past, your brain becomes hyper-vigilant for signs of rejection. Maybe a friend was 10 minutes late to dinner, or a partner used a slightly shorter tone than usual in a text. To most people, that's just a Tuesday. But to someone with this specific psychological blueprint, it's a siren. It's a sign that the end is coming. To regain a sense of control, you decide to be the one who ends it. You seize the power. You cut the tie. By being the one who leaves, you ensure that you can't be the one who is left. It's a way of protecting your heart by putting it in a box and burying it in the backyard. It's safe there, sure, but it's not exactly living. There's also this fascinating phenomenon often seen in certain personality types or those with high levels of empathy, sometimes called the door slam. It happens when you've been the giver for too long. You've been the shoulder to cry on, the listener, the one who absorbs everyone else's trauma and stress. You've been a sponge for years, but eventually a sponge can't hold any more water. It becomes saturated, and when a sponge is saturated, it stops absorbing. In fact, if you poke it, water just leaks out everywhere. People who cut others off are often the ones who didn't know how to set small boundaries along the way. They didn't know how to say, I can't talk right now, or that joke hurt my feelings. Instead, they swallowed it. They let the resentment build and build like steam in a pressure cooker with a broken valve. Eventually, the only way to release the pressure is for the whole thing to explode. The cutoff is the explosion. It's the final desperate boundary of someone who forgot they were allowed to have smaller ones. And let's be honest about the digital age we live in, because it's making this whole disappearing act so much more tempting. We are the first generation of humans who are on 24 hours a day. In the past, if you wanted to be alone, you just went home and closed the door. Now the world follows you into your bedroom, into your bed, through that glowing rectangle in your hand. The psychological cost of being constantly reachable is massive. For someone who already struggles with social anxiety or emotional overwhelm, the unread notification count is a source of genuine physiological stress. When you decide to cut everyone off, you're often just trying to uninstall the software of modern social expectation. You're trying to go back to a version of yourself that wasn't constantly being perceived, judged, or messaged. But if you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in these words, if you're the one who currently has 30 unread texts and a mounting sense of guilt, I want to offer you a different perspective. What if we stop looking at this as a flaw and start looking at it as a very loud, very confused request for safety? Your brain isn't trying to be mean. It's trying to protect you. It just has a very blunt way of doing it. It's using a sledgehammer when a light tap would do. The challenge isn't to force yourself to be a social butterfly when your wings are tired. The challenge is to learn the language of the slow fade instead of the nuclear option. It's learning that you don't have to burn the whole bridge just because you need to sit on the bank of the river by yourself for a while.
The path forward isn't about becoming someone who never wants to disappear. For some of us, that urge will always be there. It's about building a life where you don't need to disappear because you've built in enough empty space to breathe. It's about telling people, I really care about, but I am in a season where my social battery is at 5%. I'm going to be quiet for a bit, but I'm still here. It's about realizing that no is a complete sentence and that a boundary is not a wall. It's a gate. A wall keeps everyone out forever. A gate lets you choose when to open it and when to keep it closed for your own peace of mind.
If you've been on the receiving end of this, if someone you love has suddenly vanished, try to remember that it's almost never about you. It's about their own internal weather. It's about a storm they're trying to navigate, and they simply don't have the visibility to see anyone else right now. Their silence isn't a weapon, it's a shield. And if you're the one behind the shield, know that it's okay to put it down when you're ready. You don't have to apologize for needing space, and you don't have to feel like a monster because you reached your limit. You're just a human being with a nervous system that's trying its best in a very loud world.
So the next time you feel that urge to burn it all down and start over in a cabin in the woods, just take one deep breath. Maybe you don't need to delete everyone. Maybe you just need to put your phone in a drawer, make a cup of tea, and give yourself permission to be off for a few hours without the guilt. The people who truly matter will still be there when you're ready to come back. And the ones who aren't, well, maybe the circuit breaker was doing you a favor after all. Reframing this behavior from a failure of connection to an excess of self-protection is the first step toward healing. It's moving from shame to understanding. You aren't cold, you aren't broken. You're just trying to find your way back to a version of yourself that feels safe. And that, more than anything, is a journey worth taking. One small, manageable connection at a time.
As you reflect on this, think about your own circuit breakers. What are the things that push you toward that edge? Is it a specific type of social demand or a certain kind of relationship? Sometimes just naming the trigger makes the urge to run feel a little less powerful. If you've ever felt this way, or if you've found a way to bridge the gap between your need for solitude and your need for connection, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. We're all just trying to figure out how to be together without losing ourselves, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to feel a little less alone in their silence. Keep taking care of your brain, keep honoring your boundaries, and remember that it's okay to be a work in progress. You're doing better than you think.